Well, you're nice to stay so late. I want to say, first of all, a thank you to my family. My family has been with me every step of the way my entire life. And I want to begin with my partner, my best friend, and the person who has taught me the most, and that is my wife, Peggy Zone Fisher. Okay, enough is enough. Okay. And I want to thank my two phenomenal children. Jessica, who just finished her freshman year of college, and Jason, who I believe will be replacing will be replacing Jay Leno in approximately 17 years. Okay. Right here. Okay. I also want to thank the Fisher and Zone families that are here today, and with a special recognition to my father. My father and Beverly, my late mother, Boots, who died of cancer at my age, and my brothers and sisters, Barbara and Richard and Suzanne and Steve and Michael and Jill, and of course the Zones. And of course, when I say the Zones, you know that I'm referring to first Councilman Matt Zone. And to Beth, and to Madeline, to Melissa, to Michelle, and to all the Zones, thank you. I want to say a few words first about Secretary of State Jennifer Brunner. Secretary of State Brunner ran a hard-fought and substantive campaign. She's a very tough competitor, a very good Democrat, and a tireless advocate for the state of Ohio. Jennifer Brunner has also been an excellent Secretary of State, and I have said that throughout this campaign. Secretary of State Brunner has transformed Ohio's elections from the laughingstock of the nation into something that every single one of us can be proud of thanks to her. She is capable, she is talented, and I hope, and I know all of you do too, that she will continue to serve the people of Ohio, because we need more people like Jennifer Brunner in public office. Please give her a round of applause. It's not too soon to turn our attention to the next chapter, to what's about to happen this fall, and the eyes of the nation will be watching us in Ohio. Elections are about choices, and this fall we will have as clear a choice as you can possibly imagine. We can choose the past and go back to the same people and the same policies that dug us the deepest economic ditch in most of our lifetimes. Or we can choose the future, a clean energy future that supports Ohio's middle-class families with good jobs, good paying jobs that cannot be outsourced to China or India or Mexico. It's a choice between our opponent, Congressman Rob Portman, who built his career in the corridors of power in Washington, D.C., and now longs to return home to Washington, D.C., versus someone who has spent his life in every corner of Ohio, working shoulder to shoulder with the people of our great state. I think Ohioans deserve someone who has fought on the ground. I think so. I'm proud that that fight has been my life's work. I've fought every day to stand up for Ohio families and for small businesses that have been left behind by the misguided trade and economic and financial policies of the last administration of George W. Bush. Policies that defended Wall Street and ignored Main Street. You know, throughout this primary, there was something that Secretary of State Bruner and I always agreed on, and that was it's critical that we defeat Congressman Portman this fall. Many of you don't know much about him. I'm about to increase his name recognition. Let me tell you how Congressman Portman got his start in Washington, D.C. some 20 years ago. He got his start as a lobbyist. He went on to become a member of Congress. George W. Bush called him, and this is a quote, his pack mule, because he could always count on him to carry his water. President Bush then gave Congressman Portman a series of promotions. First, as the U.S. Trade Czar, where he supported and crafted trade policies that shifted tens of thousands of Ohio's jobs overseas. And then, as Budget Czar, where he completed a monumental task, helping George W. Bush turn a record surplus under President Clinton into a record deficit. The national debt grew $500 billion, that's B, billion, on Budget Czar Portman's watch. Now, with a record like that, you would think that Congressman Portman would want to run away from Washington and not come back. But he's missed Washington. And based on the millions that he has raised from the special interest, it's clear that some of those in Washington have missed him too. Now Congressman Portman's set on bringing back the same disastrous trade and economic policies that led to this economic meltdown. And Ohio can't afford that. And neither can America. Thousands of Ohioans are losing their jobs and their homes and their pensions as we are here tonight. And yet Congressman Portman opposes strong consumer protection efforts to hold Wall Street accountable and to protect Ohio's consumers. One lobbyist once said about Congressman Portman, and this is a quote, Congressman Portman deserves to have his face on the Mount Rushmore of the financial services industry. Well, I think we've had enough of Wall Street and the special interests calling the shots in D.C. And I think it's time that the people of Ohio had their say. Many of you know that I spent 7 years as the president and CEO of the Center for Families and Children here in Cleveland. And they were wonderful years because for those 7 years I was on the ground face to face with men who began to understand that having a child does not make you a man, taking care of a child makes you a man. That we worked with single mothers who didn't want to have to choose between quality child care and a good job. And we worked with young men and women who were struggling to find a place in their lives, whether to be on the streets and in a gang, or whether to be somewhere else where they could learn a sense of self-esteem and self-respect. Those times at the Center for Families and Children helped me understand that a job is much more than a paycheck. A job is something that gives you hope, it gives you dignity, and it gives you purpose. And too many Ohioans, from Wilmington, Ohio, to Mansfield, to Twinsburg, to Moraine, have lost those jobs. They've lost their homes. Many feel like they've been evicted from the American dream. These are people who worked hard. These are people who paid their bills. These are people who saved for their kids' education, and through no fault of their own, federal policies undermined what they've saved for. I believe that every single job in Ohio is worth fighting for. Some of you heard earlier tonight a story that I was proud to be involved in. One day, Sue Lesh, the mayor of Norwalk, Ohio, called me, and there was panic in her voice. She said, "Lee, Norwalk Furniture, which is 104 years old, is about to close down. Hundreds of people will lose their jobs because the bank has frozen their line of credit and will not return their phone calls." I told her I wasn't sure what I could do, but I drove out there that day. I spent the day with the mayor and the people at Norwalk Furniture. And to make a longer story short, by giving them some assistance from the state, we were able to track a wonderful team of private investors who all lived in Norwalk, Ohio. And it was those group of men and women, far more than me or the governor, although we were proud to be involved, who saved that company and saved those jobs. And I'm proud to tell you there are other stories around Ohio like that over the last several years. Alcoa, right here in Cleveland. Ford Brook Park engine plant, which I think you also heard about earlier this evening. GM Lordstown, Bridgestone, Firestone, Goodyear, the stories goes on. But here's the problem. Nothing makes me angrier than having all our hard work, all our successes, undermined by federal policies beyond our control. It's why I'm running for the United States Senate. Because I've learned that the governor and I and the state can do all the right things. But if the federal government is giving tax breaks to companies to ship jobs overseas, bailing out Wall Street while shortchanging small businesses who've never missed a payment in their life, then what happens is Ohio's workers, Ohio's families, and Ohio's small businesses get left behind. I know their stories because I've been with them on the ground. For the last 3 years, I was in Wilmington often, where DHL, a German-owned company, left the American market, and in its wake, 10,000 people out of work almost in a minute. This campaign is about them, and the campaign that we all wage in the next 6 months is for them. Last year, after Congressman Portman entered the race, he sat down for an interview with the Washington Post. And let me read to you what that headline said. Quote, "Portman, the insider. Will Mr. Washington go back to Washington?" Well, tonight I say to Congressman Portman, sir, with all due respect, I believe you've done enough damage in D.C. already, and I don't think Ohio will send you back. If you believe, as I do, that it's time to stand up to the large Wall Street interests who too often get their way in Washington, then I hope you'll go to our website, www.fisherforohio.com, and get involved in our campaign. If you believe it's time for a senator who has spent his life on the ground in Ohio and not in Washington, D.C., then I ask you to please join us. If you want to end tax breaks and trade deals that ship our jobs overseas, then I ask you to please join us. And if you believe that we need to create a new clean energy future, significantly and dramatically reduce our dependence on foreign oil from countries that hate us and in many cases want to kill us, and instead focus on creating the renewable and advanced energy jobs of the future that cannot be outsourced to any other country, then I ask you to join us for that too. And if you believe that it's time to stop bailouts for Wall Street and start providing loans to small businesses in Marietta and Mansfield and Slavic Village in Detroit Shoreway, then join us. And if you believe that it's time for someone who has spent their life fighting for Ohio jobs to represent us in the U.S. Senate, then I ask you tonight to celebrate, to enjoy yourselves, but to understand that we have some very, very hard work beginning tomorrow morning. So I ask you to understand that this campaign is not about me. In fact, it's not even about many of you. It's about people who couldn't be here tonight. People who are struggling to put food on the table, a roof overhead. People have worked hard all their lives, and somehow, for reasons that they can't understand but is way beyond their control, it seems like larger interests are working against them. I've had the honor of working with so many of those people over the years, whether it's been as lieutenant governor or the Center for Families and Children. And that's why I think you're here tonight. It's why I'm here tonight. And it's why in November we will have a great victory. And that victory will be for the hardworking people of Ohio who want a chance and a piece of the American dream. Thanks a lot.